Hey everybody, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and of all the weird things, we are pulling on the thread of a motif woven through the whole Bible about clothing, about being robed, and about that meaning more than just being naked or not naked. There's this metaphor, there's this motif of being robed, and specifically of God robing people in a certain identity, in an identity that is in Him, that is only from Him, and that is very unchanging and very permanent once He has put those robes upon you. If you haven't caught the last few days of the podcast, this might be one of those where it really would make more sense if you went back and got those, but come at it however you want. All right, I'm going to have my buddy Jeff play some music, and we're going to get after it. Okay, we've all heard about Julius Caesar. He's a super famous guy in Rome. He died 40-ish years before Jesus was born. And he died in a sad way. I mean, he got shanked to death by all of his friends all at once in public. This is a bummer. It's not how you want to go. But I remember the first time I learned about the events leading up to that, how everything went south, how everything got to that point. And there were several reasons where when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. I see how that could be threatening, or why people got worked up about this or worked up about that. But one that never made a ton of sense to me when I was younger was this idea that somebody tried to get him to wear purple, or wanted him to wear purple, or maybe he had a little bit of purple or something on for a while. Oh, yeah, I grew up in Colorado. We root for the Rockies. Lots of people wear purple. It's not that big a deal. You can buy a shirt at King Soopers. That's a grocery store. They shouldn't even sell shirts. But you can buy Rockies shirts there for like $6. They're awful, but they have purple all over them. $6 at a grocery store? That's for normal people. That's not a declaration of royalty. But it was when Caesar did it back in the day. Purple was hard to make, it turns out. I understand this better now. There's a very specific type of shell that only existed in a specific part of the ocean or the sea. And there's a very specific refining process that was very expensive to make purple dye happen. And the sheer economic implications of all of that were part of the reason that purple was such a rarity, and part of the reason that purple was so associated with royalty. And in Rome, they didn't have kings, so you weren't supposed to wear purple. But the whole issue with Julius Caesar was that people were getting Caesar fever, and they were thinking, well, maybe he should be king. Maybe we should let him wear purple just a little bit here and there. But now that I've lived a little bit more, I kind of get it. Stuff means stuff, and those meanings become very powerful. You can say a lot without saying any words if you understand the complex realm of the meanings of all of the things and gestures and whatnot. And purple, if it meant royalty and they didn't want anyone to be royalty, then I get it. If you put it on and you make long eye contact with somebody who disagrees with you while you're wearing that purple, both parties know what you're saying, and people are going to get pretty worked up about that. Bottom line is, you weren't allowed to robe yourself with that authority in Rome. And if somebody started to flirt with robing themselves in that, well, they might get shanked by all of their friends all at once. We live in this deconstructionist, nothing matters age. That's how it's been for a while now. Or real informal, whatever. But it's kind of a farce, because stuff still does mean stuff. The clothes do kind of still maketh the man. I don't mean that in a pompous, fancy, dress snappy, or you're nothing kind of way. I mean it in a everything means something way. Stuff means stuff kind of way. Whatever you have on, it is saying something. For better, for worse, or for funnier, or for more aggressive, like whatever. Everything, stuff means stuff. Everything means something. Well, we're finding that that is the case as well in the Bible. The assumption is there that how you are robed, what you are robed in, it means something. And we just got done tracking this whole motif through the Old Testament over the last couple of days, wherein being clothed in something is to be that thing. And the motif got thicker as it got toward the New Testament. Yesterday I teased that Jesus picks up on this motif as well, and today I'm going to pay that off. We're going to look at Matthew 22. This is one of the parables, one of the teachings that Jesus throws out when he gets to Jerusalem right before he gets arrested and crucified. He's getting tested and peppered with questions by all of these different religious groups. This happens in the same zip code as the should we pay taxes to Caesar bit. And then we get this parable that I think understandably a lot of people find to be confusing because it sort of sounds elitist at first. But we get this parable from Jesus that sort of has a clothes maketh the man vibe. carrying over from the Old Testament. Here's what we got. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to all those who'd been invited to the banquet to tell them, 'Come,' but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who've been invited that I've prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered and everything's ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business, and the rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. Well, the king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited didn't deserve to come. Go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. 'Friend,' he asked, 'how did you get in here without wearing wedding clothes?' And the man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.'" Obviously, I want to go do a whole breakdown on what all of this means and how it works, but I already did it, and I'll ask Jeff to link to the podcasts from the season on the book of Matthew where I did that. The bigger point here for our purposes is, did you catch the garment thing? That's the confusing part of the parable, right? The first part makes sense. Well, the king put together an ancient world banquet. There's not refrigeration. Like, you got to come when it's time to come. You all said you would come. You're just waiting on notice. Here's your notice. Show up. They didn't. And further, they were mean and fussy and dishonest about it, and even hurt the king's servants who were just there to invite him to come to a wedding they'd already RSVP'd to. What the heck? So real quick, this king's like, cool, let's just go burn their thatched roof cottages real quick. Done. Now, about that banquet, we were still got to have it, right? I mean, that cattle's all butchered and we're ready to go. Go get some people off the street, compel them to come in. So the servants go and do that. That part, I think, makes sense. One pass through the Bible and you have a sense of what's going on there. The part that a lot of times gets left out when people preach on this and that's confusing is the part about the wedding clothes. Well, why do you have to wear wedding clothes to a wedding? I like to wear unlaced high tops to things, Mom. It makes me look cool. You just don't understand. Well, the expectation here was, no, we're having an event. And the outward symbol of the fact that you have been received into this very exclusive event in the household of this very powerful king is that he has robed you in his wedding garments. You're not better than these. In fact, you kind of have to have them on. And now you don't have them on, you're a fraud. What are you doing? So whatever the guy's getting wrong here, and you can go and listen to the episodes on Matthew and see what you make of whatever I said a few years ago. Whatever they're getting wrong here, it ranges somewhere between a prideful rejecting of the robing of royalty that was attempted to be given to them, ranging maybe all the way over to deceit, actively trying to sneak their way into something that wasn't for them. You haven't been made a part of this family. You don't want anything to do with the family. You just want the riches of this. And we see through you because you're not clothed in the robes that I give you that identify you as being a part of this blessing, a part of this thing. It's pretty thick, but maybe it's a little bit confusing. It's like, I don't know. That's a hard parable anyway. I don't like that one. Do you have another example that is easier and it doesn't take so much explaining to make sense of how Jesus does the clothes make us the man thing? Yeah, I do. Luke 15. This is maybe the most famous parable of all, right? This is the prodigal son. This is the one where the guy's like, I don't want to wait for my dad to die. I want your stuff now. So he goes and he's like, give me my stuff. And the dad's like, oh, okay. He gives it to the kid, and the kid goes and just blows it all on stupid living. And then he figures out after a while when he's out of money and he's in a desperate situation, he's like, servants at my dad's house live better than this. And he prepares this whole speech, and he goes back to his dad, and he's getting ready to give the speech, but his dad sees him from a long way off. Apparently his dad's been waiting for him, and his dad does this super indignified thing, and he runs down the road to meet his son. He doesn't care about looking cool, and he embraces his son, and the son's like, hold up, I got a whole speech. I'm not worthy. And the dad just blows past the speech, and I imagine him doing the little circly gesture with his finger to get the servants to come over. And in verse 22 of Luke 15, it goes like this. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. That's his son who had been gone. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. What's the first thing the father wants to do? His kid's back. Just like yesterday, whenever we were talking about it, in Zechariah, you get the priest in filthy clothes. And in that situation, it's like, no, this will never do. You have a more important role than that. You need to be robed in this that identifies you with the household, that identifies you with the father, that prepares you for the role that you have in the household. The father in Luke 15, in the parable of the prodigal son, that's his first impulse as the head of a house. This is my son. But his current attire makes it look like he's not. Someone could mistake him for something else. He is under my protection. He is under my care. He is my son, and that is unchanging. Get the robe on him. Get the ring on him. Get the clean sandals on him. I mean, it sounds just like what was happening back there in Zechariah 3. And that, by the way, was not an accident on the part of Jesus either. He knew exactly what he was doing by painting that picture for the Jewish audience, including the Pharisees who were sitting there hearing him give that parable. So here's what we've established so far. Paul in Galatians chapter 3 uses very specific language saying, "You are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus, for all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ." And I think you and I both suspected there was more to that than just a colorful literary flourish. Ooh, clothed with Christ. That'll be fun. People are going to love it when I write that. You and I both suspected that there was something much more going on with that language that is tied up in the notion of a change of essence, a fundamental ser level transformation of who you are, and that somehow being clothed in Christ is emblematic of that transformation. Well, you and I went through a jaunt through the Old Testament, and going from the early parts of the Old Testament to the latter parts of the Old Testament, we see that motif all over the place, and we see that motif crystallizing right as we get to the end of the Old Testament, and right as we get to the point where the Old Testament hands it off to the New Testament. Then what happens in the New Testament? Jesus hammers the same language. So now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, we're done here. We did what we need to do, and it's all clarified. We see what Paul's doing. But you'd be wrong, because we got one more day on this, because I want to track down this motif through the rest of the New Testament, where it becomes even more clear. We'll hit that next time we talk. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.